As I've gone on this little journey into Skylanders, I've spent quite a lot of money actually working on this stuff, and even though I played 3 out of the 6 Skylanders games, I have seen quite a lot of stuff. But while I was gathering footage for Skylanders in the future, since I just finished cleaning out all my old footage, I would come to a rather strange realization. Out of all the Skylanders games I have ever touched, even Superchargers, which many consider to be the worst in the franchise, Trap Team was the only one that I didn't want to play, and the more that I really began to think about it, I realized that I actually don't like this game, to the point that I actually kinda hate a lot of aspects about it. Now, if you are just joining the Skylanders community, you probably don't know how beloved Skylanders Trap Team is compared to the rest of the games in the franchise, due to the fact that its gimmick was considered one of the best. Adding on to that, it was the first mainline console game to have a group of main villains that wasn't Kaos, well, at least until the end, and it also introduced a bunch of new characters that stuck with the franchise until the very end of the games. But for me, I have a lot of qualms against Trap Team that have been building up for a long time, and today I want to discuss that. But instead of just ranting and raving about the stuff I don't like, I want to actually give this video a lot more structure. So let me explain. Every single point I give is going to be given its own dedicated section, and I'm not only going to explain why it doesn't work, but I'm also going to talk about how it can be potentially improved. So with that being said, let's get to explaining. Now, one of the big issues I really have with Skylanders Trap Team is how former Skylanders in this game are treated. But to be completely frank, this is an issue that every Skylanders game has faced in the past and something that wasn't introduced with Trap Team, or at least I don't think it was. What I mean by this is how older Skylanders seemingly get either their moveset or attack screwed up in a way that either benefits the Skylander, which from my experience is extremely rare, or screws something up with the Skylander that makes them less fun, which is the other 90%. An extremely obvious case of this happening is with the Swap Force core Skylander known as Wind-Up. He was an absolute demon due to how he could knock enemies into the air and basically stun lock them, along with his really fun winding mechanic and lock-on mechanic that allows him to lock onto enemies. But when it comes to his gameplay in Trap Team, one of his most integral moves, his primary, barely even works properly if you decide to unlock symbols or Wind-Up Punch. If you did that, then you're screwed, because for some reason when you mash the primary attack for him specifically, it will instead charge up either of those attacks like you were holding the button down. So instead of pulling off your combo like you usually do, if you get unlucky, Wind-Up will just stop randomly in the middle of it, not only screwing up your flow but leaving you open to retaliation from other enemies, or the enemy you were just manhandling not even a moment ago, because from your perspective, you don't even know that you were charging up an attack and have no idea what's happening. Now, for most Skylanders, they weren't mishandled as much as Wind-Up was, but they all have something that makes them more annoying to play as than their prior counterpart. Now, this may be speculation, but a pretty good reason for this may be because Toys for Bob switched from the Smart Action game engine, the one they used for Giants and Spyro's Adventures, to Virtua Fighter, Vicarious' game engine. Now, from what I have gathered, the reason why this happened is because it was much easier to port games using Vicarious' engine and work on online multiplayer than their own. So they basically had to make Trap Team from scratch, and after learning about that, a lot of stuff begins to make sense, so there's kinda no real way of avoiding this. But outside of the Skylanders just becoming, well, worse off in one way or another, one of the other big things that screwed them up is the elemental gates, since they are locked behind Trap Masters. So let's get into the next section, the gimmick. Now, before I critique the trap gimmick as a whole, I first want to explain it so we can all get on the same footing. So let's not waste any more time. Throughout the game, you can fight a multitude of bosses that, after defeating them, you can trap in these traptanium crystals called, well, traps. And as long as you have a trap that aligns with the villain's element, you can trap them and play as them for a set period of time that shrinks whenever you take damage. If you don't end up capturing a villain using a trap for one reason or another, they go in this prison at the academy that you can put villains into later, and the villains also have a side quest that, if completed by the required villain, will evolve that villain, boosting their attack and the length of their timer. The Trap Masters, on the other hand, are special Skylanders that not only do increased damage against villains, but also have Traptanium weapons, which allows them to smash Traptanium crystals across the game and access secret areas or get access to the items within. Or you could just use them to unlock the Traptanium gates, and don't worry, I will tear that to pieces later. At this point, you probably noticed that instead of talking about the Trap Masters and the traps together, I instead talked about them separately. And the reason why is because they are separate. This isn't a game where there is a single gimmick. Instead, there are two major ones pretending to be the same: the traps and the Trap Masters. And because they were split apart in the way they were both hampered in very similar ways. Tackling the Trap Masters first, they, at least in my eyes, are just elevated cores given artificial value. And I know that sounds rather harsh, but let me ask you this. What makes them so different from the cores outside of stat values? 3 things. They are the only ones who can open Traptanium gates, they do extra damage against villains, and they are the only ones who can break Traptanium crystals. But almost every single one of them feels artificial in my eyes, and to understand why, let's take a look at the swappers from the game prior. I'm fully aware that this is probably my bias speaking, but out of every gimmick group, I truly believe that the Swap Force Skylanders are the best and most creative out of the ones shown. But getting back on track, the Swap Force has the unique ability to swap top and bottom halves with any other Swap Force Skylanders, and because of this, they already have a leg up on the Trap Masters. They not only encourage players to get experimental and find their own way to play through interacting with the figures on their own, but it also bakes the gimmicks into the Skylanders where you don't think about it without them. Like the Trap Masters, the Swappers have their own form of Traptanium gates in the form of dual element gates, but unlike the Traptanium gates, the dual gates don't really feel as restrictive. All you need to open the elemental gates in Swap Force is to have 2 elements present to unlock the gate, meaning that if you don't have the legs for a certain swapper to unlock the gate, you can just grab a friend and 2 Skylanders who do have those elements to unlock and play through it. It's actually genius in a business sense how these gates are able to encourage the player to get a swapper without actively forcing them to get one. Yes, you can get a buddy to help you open the gate, but that requires you to have another controller and 2 Skylanders that match those elements, if you even have them. So it's just easier to get a cool Skylander that you can mix and match with the other 2 you got in the starter pack and get another cool combo. But the Traptanium gates, however, don't have this luxury. You not only have to have a Skylander of the same element, but you also have to use a Trap Master. This means that there's no true alternative around the gates outside of glitching through them, because unlike in the past where you could use any Skylander with the right element, and optionally 2 for the dual gates, you have to use a Trap Master as well as the Trap Master having the same element. This is what I mean by the Trap Masters having artificial value. The Traptanium gates and Traptanium crystals don't feel like parts of the Trap Masters that make them special, like the Swapper's swap ability and swap zones. They are artificial changes to already existing systems that force you to get Trap Masters. And if you think that the Trap Masters are money sinks, then you haven't even seen the traps themselves yet. You not only have to go out and buy 6 more traps outside the life and water traps that you are given in the starter pack, but you also need to get the light, dark, and chaos traps since this game introduces the life and dark elements. That's 9, count it, 9 traps you need to buy if you want to play as every villain. And I know that a lot of you are expecting me to torch the villains, but out of everything involving the traps, the villains were handled the best in my eyes, and the only problem I really have is how deceiving some of them can be. Like, you could expect one of them to be, let's say, a life Skylander, and all of a sudden they're water, but it's not really explained. But I kind of understand why they did that, because they had to even them out. So, how do we actually fix this in the most practical way? And I'm pretty sure I have a very good few solutions, the first of which being to merge the traps with the Trap Masters, and make them do the trapping. And this isn't as unfeasible as you might think. Every Trap Master has a Traptanium weapon, so those could just be the substitute for the traps themselves, which means instead of having villains locked to traps of certain elements, while gates and Traptanium crystals are locked to the Trap Masters, they are all just one and the same. Yes, it still locks enemies behind elements, but it doesn't make you buy 2 separate items, and to tackle the gates, we can actually take one of 2 options here. We could either completely remove the gates and return them to their default state, where you just need a single element, but that's that's kind of boring in my eyes, so let's try this. Instead of relying on a trap master with a certain element, we can instead make it reliant on the Traptanium itself while the element serves as a second key. This means that all you need is the trap master to unlock gates, meaning that if you want to unlock a gate and don't have the trap master of the element, all you need to do is hook up an extra controller and put a Skylander of the matching element on it. But since I've talked about them so much, let's actually get into the biggest stain on the game in my eyes. Now, I know that this is probably not true, but when it comes to the elemental gates, I'm pretty sure that this is the game that absolutely killed them. The gates kind of remind me of that one Caleb City clip, to be honest, of him just falling down the stairs. They screwed up once and the gates just collapsed in on themselves. And the big reason why I believe this is because these are the only type of elemental gates in the franchise that made elements almost redundant. In every previous game, it was simple. If your Skylander matched the elemental gate, you could go into the gate. Even in Swap Force, every gate wasn't a dual gate. It was just a good chunk of them, so if you owned the basic Skylanders, which most people already did before buying Swap Force, they could get access to the gates as well. But in Trap Team, you don't even get the option of having a normal gate. The only gates that exist in this game are Traptanium gates, meaning that if you got one Trap Master, like most people have, 90% of the gates in the entire game are going to be inaccessible unless you cop up, hang on, let me do some math. Yeah, that, subtract the 1. Oh yeah, $180 at the time without accounting for inflation. Or people just jacking stuff up on the resale market. And if you royally cough up this dough, and sometimes extra, what do you think your reward is? That's right! Your reward is nothing! These have to be some of the lamest elemental gates in the freaking franchise. I watched a whole completionist series and played through a lot of them, and they are all mostly the same. Get in, do some sort of puzzle or fight, get your hat or whatever collectible is in there, and get out. Hell, some of these gates don't even have a puzzle to do. You just jump a couple of times, open the present, and then leave. They're dead ass just a room. What happened to the occasional side quest that used to be in these gates? You know, little bro Pete getting his herd back from Lieutenant Wolf, you helping a skull on a pike get his lucky hat back, the water gate where you save a Gilman from a giant chompy, or hell, what about you digging a bunch of snow rollers out of the snow in an undead gate, or that one weird one in Rampart Ruins? You all know what I'm talking about. Yeah, Swap Force had the occasional lame gate or ones where you just do nothing but puzzles or parkour, but even there's something to praise because the gates themselves look absolutely beautiful and each element has its own style. In Trap Team, most of the gates outside of a select few have different lighting that either doesn't suit them, is barely noticeable, or is just completely lame. But at this point, I'm beating a dead horse. These gates don't feel like extensions to the experience. They feel tacked on, they feel hollow, and a lot of them feel completely and utterly soulless. Now, at this point, many of you might be wondering what the big catalyst for this video was, and to be honest with you, I didn't really tell you the whole story in the intro. Yes, me not really liking this game was a big factor for all of this, but that wasn't the straw that broke the camel's back. What was the straw that broke the camel's back was what happened to me in Rainfish Rivera. Near the start of the level, I'm pretty sure right after a boss fight, you have to go grab some wood and take it over to build a bridge. Now, while I was doing this, I decided to swap my Skylander, which somehow caused the game to bug out, causing me to drop the planks and for them to bug out midair, meaning I had to restart the level. I sat there for 5 minutes trying to get those planks, and nothing worked. Hell, they weren't even glowing. So what I think happened is that the tracking where it's supposed to follow your Skylander and the code for that, yeah, that just broke somewhere, and that's when it finally hit me. I have experienced more game bugs and glitches in this game than I had ever had in Swap Force and Superchargers combined. Hell, I'm pretty sure I've experienced less bugs in most of the games I've ever played in my life. Actually, there's only one game on par with this one for how busted it is. Pixel Strike. And it's not just the garden variety bugs of the camera not working or the giants T-posing sometimes and getting stuck in their own animation. It's the times where I had to restart the level. And it's not just a one-off time. No, it's baked into my experience of the game. When I played the final level for the first time, and while I was in the middle of fighting Kaos, I had to leave for a moment. And I know I was gone for at the most 2 minutes. But when I got back, however, the game bugged out so bad that when I unpaused it, the pause screen didn't disappear, and I was stuck in place, while everything else around me was freezing, forcing me to restart the whole damn level. And before people get on about SWAT Force's bugs and the bugs in the other games, I have never experienced one in my entire playthrough now and when I was a kid. Hell, I even decided to go hunting for SWAT Force's bugs throughout Reddit and throughout YouTube, and the only, and I mean only, game-breaking bug I found was a glitch where it didn't register your save as 100%ing the game. That is it. A bug that most people barely even know of or will ever experience. And to add on to this, it's only in the Wii version from what I understand, along with a few other bugs of this nature. But do you want to know the real kicker? The real funny stuff? I had to sift through Trap Team bugs to learn about this one. And the only, and I mean only time I saw a bug from SWAT Force was when somebody in the archivist, go check that out, that's kinda hype, shared a recording of them and a buddy hitting 2 triggers at once, and the game still functioned. But when it comes to Trap Team and its minor and major glitches and bugs, they are everywhere. This is not a small colony in the corner of the house, it is an infestation. People have already figured out how to glitch through those stupid Traptanium gates. They've already figured out how to go faster than they should be. Hell, they've even figured out how to double jump using the villains. But that's just the intentional ones. Sometimes the battle gates spasm out and don't realize that you defeated every enemy, meaning that you have to restart the whole level. Hoodsickle is so broken design-wise that he could just walk through gates without a care in the world. In Supreme Stink, if you jump down a specific hole as a villain when their timer is about to run out, it will break the timer, making you invincible. Sometimes the new bridge mechanic just doesn't work and you're once again going to have to restart or skip out on a reward depending on what area you are in the game. Invincibility glitches are literally everywhere. Sometimes there's phantom money that you can't pick up, the aforementioned camera bugs are all over the place, and for some people, the Skylander doesn't even register on the portal. What's crazy about what I just said is that all of the bugs I just told you here are just a fraction of them. I know that most of the Skylanders games are probably rushed, and I know that Toys for Bob were working with an engine that they weren't really experienced with, but was it really just that hard to work with this thing? Like, did Vicarious not help them at all with this? Like, it's their game engine, they should know. But to wrap all of this up, Skylanders Trap Team is a tragic game in my eyes. On paper, it has one of the best mechanics in the Skylanders franchise, but because of a lot of factors, this is the only Skylanders game that I will actively avoid. Hell, I'm not even sure if I'm going to use Trap Team footage as a background for this video outside of the bug examples. It is just that messy in my eyes. But I will actually like to hear what you guys think of Trap Team because I know there's a lot of other things in this game that people like. So with that said and done, thank you for watching. Like always, hit the subscribe button if you enjoy content like this, share this around so I can grow the channel, leave some comments down below to make the algorithm happy, check out Return to Skylands, its Discord, and a bunch of other stuff down in the description below, and I will see you all in the next one.